Hello P6, welcome to Monday. I hope you've had a really lovely weekend and enjoyed that snowfall. Wasn't it really beautiful to see? For today's literacy task, we are going to have, there's a couple of different parts today to think about. First thing I would like you to do is make sure you do some reading today. So log into Bug Club and then go and take yourself somewhere quiet in your house and settle yourself down for at least 15 minutes or so and try and do some reading. Once you've done that, then for literacy activities today, we are going to be concentrating on speech marks, which are sometimes called inverted commas. And you might remember that the very first week of lockdown back at the start of January, we looked a little bit at speech marks then. So today we're going to continue with that and we're going to think a little bit more about making sure that we know exactly where to place those speech marks. So I have in front of me an excerpt from chapter 2 of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. And in this excerpt, there is quite a bit of speech. So let's read through it together. And as we read through it, I want you to think which are the spoken words. It says, "One evening, when Charlie went in to see his grandparents, he said to them, 'Is it really true that Wonka's chocolate factory is the biggest in the world?' 'True,' cried all four of them at once. 'Of course it's true. Good heavens, didn't you know that? It's about 50 times as big as any other.' 'And is Mr. Willy Wonka really the cleverest chocolate maker in the world?' 'My dear boy,' said Grandpa Joe, raising himself up a little higher on his pillow, 'Mr. Willy Wonka is the most amazing, the most fantastic, the most extraordinary chocolate maker the world has ever seen. I thought everybody knew that.' 'I knew he was famous, Grandpa Joe, and I knew he was very clever.' 'Clever?' cried the old man. 'He's more than that. He's a magician with chocolate. He can make anything he wants. Isn't that a fact, my dears?' The other three old people nodded their heads slowly up and down and said, 'Absolutely true, just as true as can be.' Now, in this excerpt, can you see where the speech is? Well, we show speech using speech marks, and we put speech marks at the beginning and at the end of where the speaking happens. So what we're going to do is, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a highlighter and I'm going to highlight the words that were actually spoken. So the first words that were spoken were, "Is it really true that Wonka's chocolate factory is the biggest in the world?" Then the grandparents reply, "True. Of course it's true. Good heavens, didn't you know that? It's about 50 times as big as any other." Then there's more speech. "And is Mr. Willy Wonka really the cleverest chocolate maker in the world?" Then Grandpa Joe answers, "My dear boy, Mr. Willy Wonka is the most amazing, the most fantastic, the most extraordinary chocolate maker the world has ever seen. I thought everybody knew that." Then we've got more speech. "I knew he was famous, Grandpa Joe, and I knew he was very clever." "Clever? He's more than that. He's a magician with chocolate. He can make anything he wants. Isn't that a fact, my dears?" Absolutely true. Just as true as can be. So, not all of this is speech. Some of it is explaining what else is happening, that Charlie's going into the room, that Grandpa Joe is raising himself up a little higher on his pillow. But where the speech happens, we have our speech marks. Now let's take a look at those speech marks. So the first person to speak is Charlie, and he's asking a question. So look what happens. He said to them, now do you see what happens here? Before the speech starts, there's a comma. So this is what we call a reporting clause. This bit of information tells us who's speaking. We know he is Charlie. He's speaking to them, his grandparents. So this is the reporting clause. After the reporting clause, before he speaks, we've got the comma, there's a space, then we've got our speech marks. And what do you notice about the first word that's spoken? It's a capital letter for the word is. Whenever we have the first spoken word, it begins with a capital letter. So, is it really true that Wonka's chocolate factory is the biggest in the world? Now that's a question. So, Charlie's asked a question, we have to have a question mark. Look where the speech marks go. They're after the question mark. The grandparents then answer together, true. Of course it's true. Right the way through to as big as any other. Now, they don't say the words, cried all four of them at once. So we've got speech marks before the capital T of true and a question mark, and we close the speech marks because this bit isn't said. We've got our full stop, new speech marks, and then they keep speaking. Now, it's more than one sentence. There's 1, 2, 3 parts, and then we close the speech marks because this is all spoken in one continuous go. Who's speaking on this line? The grandparents have spoken there. Who asks, and is Mr. Willy Wonka really the cleverest chocolate maker in the world? Well, it has to be Charlie, doesn't it? It doesn't say, asked Charlie. But we can work out from the conversation that's happening that this must be Charlie speaking. So we've got new speech marks, a capital A, question mark because it's a question, followed by the speech marks. Then Grandpa Joe replies, my dear boy. Then again, we've got everything that he says, and he says all of this bit in one long bit. So we don't put close the speech marks there after seen. We keep going speech marks until he finishes. Charlie speaks again. Again, we're not told that's Charlie speaking, but we can work it out. B6, do you know what it means when we put 3 dots like that? Why would Roald Dahl have put 3 dots there? I knew he was famous, Grandpa Joe, and I knew he was very clever. Why does an author use those 3 dots? Yeah, you're right. It's because Charlie hasn't actually finished speaking. He was still considering what to say next, but Grandpa Joe jumps in and interrupts him. So Charlie doesn't actually get the chance to finish what he was saying, and Grandpa Joe jumps in. New speech marks, capital C, exclamation mark before the speech marks. Clever, new speech marks, he's more than that. He finishes with a question and closes the speech marks. And the old people reply to him. Absolutely true, just as true as can be. What's really important, P6, today and everything that you're doing is that you think really carefully about placing those speech marks. The speech marks go before the first word that's spoken. Can you see that they're not above it, they're before it? So before the first word that's spoken. And when we close our speech marks, they always close after a bit of punctuation. That might be a full stop, close the speech marks. It could be a question mark, close the speech marks. It could be an exclamation mark, close the speech marks. It could be a comma, depending on where it falls, like comma there, close the speech marks. What you need to do today, P6, is be really careful about where you place your speech marks. Now, before you begin today's written activity, what I would like you to do is, the next thing I'd like you to do is go into, on our website, go and find the link into BBC Bite Size. And when you go into BBC Bite Size, you'll be looking at a passage also to do with writing direct speech. And in it, there are some videos for you to watch and then some activities down at the bottom of the page to help you practice using speech marks. So go and have a look through BBC Bite Size. Also, go and have a look in Education City. And in Education City today, if you go and use Be a Good Sport 2, then that will help you to revise everything that you need to know about our speech marks for today. Once you've done that, then go and find the written activities. Now, there are 2 to choose from today. If you choose to do the higher level today, then have a read through the information that's on the page. In your first part, you're writing out the sentences. All the punctuation has been given to you apart from the speech marks. So you need to work out where the speech is and put the inverted commas or speech marks into the right places. I would always suggest highlight the words. If you print this out, highlight the words that are spoken before you begin. In part 2, the making sure, in this one, there is a little bit extra in the middle. The reporting clause, which tells us who it is that's speaking, is in the middle of the speech. Help, screamed Emma. I'm drowning. She says help. She says I'm drowning. In the middle of that, it tells us who it is that's speaking. So you're going to have 2 sets of speech marks. A set of speech marks around the word help and a new set of speech marks around the words I'm drowning. And so on in the rest of that bit. And if you've chosen this level for your final challenge, for your final written challenge, I wonder if you can take this conversation and write it out as speech. The first one has already been done for you. If you choose to do the slightly easier level, then again, there's some information in the yellow boxes to help you get started. And then you've been given a conversation. It's set out like a cartoon strip where we've got our speech bubbles. One person speaks, somebody else replies. So we've got the conversation. It's then been written out down at the bottom of the page. Can you go and put in the speech marks or the inverted commas just before the person starts to speak and then just after the punctuation when they finish speaking? For your second part, have a look at the 4 pictures that you've got and can you work out what you think each person is saying? So in the first one, what do you think the doctor is saying to the child and how does the child reply? What does the man shout and what does the woman shout back? What does Dan say and Lisa answers? And what does Mrs. Franks ask and Joanne replies? So can you work out what you think the conversation is, what's happening there? And if you get all of that done, in the final part for you, in your practice your punctuation part, all the punctuation has been left out. So the capital letters, full stops, commas, exclamation marks, everything else has been left out. So again, it would be a really good idea, get your highlighter, highlight the words that have been spoken, and then see if you can use that to help you write out each sentence and add in the speech marks and the other punctuation. And P6 today, it's really important, yes, to think about the speech marks, but it's also really important to think about making sure that you've got all of that punctuation in, not just the speech marks. If you get all of that done, then if you go back into Education City, then one of the things that I would like you to have a look at in Education City is Play Live Words. Now, if we go into Play Live Words and we look at our home screen for Play Live Words for Brooklands, well, Play Live resets the leaderboard every week. So at the minute, at the time I'm filming this, there are no scores saved for this week because it's been reset. Last week at the top of the leaderboard, we had Jadal and Lucy had both managed to get scores well into the 70s. I wonder who this week could be in that top 10 for Play Live Words. So why don't at some point today you challenge yourself and see how well you can get on with that. Good luck.